At Online MedEd, we walk you through every topic in detail, so you're ready for the boards and the wards.
Understanding nutrition for hypertension is a fascinating topic, and there's a direct relationship between the foods that we eat and the foods that we don't eat and our resulting blood pressure. So let's go into detail today about what foods to eat and what foods to either minimize or eliminate in order to maximize our ability to reduce blood pressure. So we start at the top. Hypertension is controlled by the types of foods that you're consuming. So there's direct negative consequences of consuming foods that contain salt, whether this is directly ingesting salt by itself or by ingesting foods that have salt in them. Now, one of the most salted foods in the grocery store is chicken. This may be a surprise to you, but food manufacturers actually inject brine into chicken in order for it to taste better and for it to weigh more so that when you go and check out at the grocery store, you end up paying more money. So other foods that contain salt include chips, French fries, and bread. So these are all foods that have a direct negative impact on blood pressure. The next group of foods, or beverages I should say, are alcohol. So anything that contains alcohol can increase your blood pressure, including beer, wine, or hard alcohol. The third group of foods include high-fat foods. Now this may be new to you, but there's a substantial amount of evidence-based research that shows that high-fat foods have a direct negative consequence on flow-mediated dilation. So just as a review, flow-mediated dilation refers to the ability of blood vessels to dilate in response to increased shear stress. And when you cripple a blood vessel's ability to dilate, you increase the blood pressure within that vessel. So these high-fat foods that cripple flow-mediated dilation include oil, meat, dairy, fish, and eggs. The next category of foods that have a hypertensive effect include oil. So these are all oil products. Whether these oils are coming from olive oil, coconut oil, things like sesame oil, walnut oil, avocado oil, or even canola oil. So oils, not only do they function like high-fat foods in reducing flow-mediated dilation, but they also reduce nitric oxide production from endothelial cells inside of blood vessels all throughout your body. And we're going to go into a little bit more detail about that in a minute. The last category of foods that have a direct negative impact on hypertension are dairy products. And just like oils, dairy products reduce flow-mediated dilation and they reduce nitric oxide production. Now these foods include cheese, as we saw from the salt category. I forgot to write that, so I'll put that here. Cheese contains a lot of salt as well. So cheese not only contains salt, it also contains a lot of fat. In addition to cheese, we have foods like milk, ice cream, as well as butter and yogurt. So these are the foods that actually are known in the evidence-based research to actually increase hypertension. So the next question we ask is, all right, well, what are the foods that can actually cause a reduction in blood pressure? So let's go into detail about these foods. So foods that reduce blood pressure include foods that are high in vitamin C. Now these foods include foods like, the canonical citrus fruits that we all know about, but they also include foods like kiwis and strawberries, foods like kale, and then foods like broccoli and cauliflower. Now, in addition to vitamin C rich foods, you can also reduce blood pressure by consuming foods that are rich in potassium. So potassium rich foods include things like spinach, sweet potato, watermelon, and beets. So whether they're vitamin C rich foods or potassium rich foods, both of them can reduce blood pressure. In addition to this, another category of foods include vinegars. Now vinegars, whether we're talking about balsamic vinegar or apple cider vinegar or sherry vinegar, all of these vinegars, within hours of consuming a vinegar, in the same way that within hours of consuming a high-fat food, we see a direct negative consequence on flow-mediated dilation, within hours of consuming vinegars, we see a direct positive increase in flow-mediated dilation. So we got balsamic vinegar, apple cider vinegar, and sherry vinegar here. The next category of foods include green teas. Now, green teas include, there's over 100 varieties of green teas. And I'll just write 2 or 3 of them up here. So the first one would be oolong green tea, then we have jasmine green tea, and then we also have matcha green tea. So regardless of the type of green tea, all of these can reduce blood pressure. Now finally, the last category I will write as plant-based diets. So whether you want to refer to yourself or whether your patients want to refer to themselves as being vegetarian or as being vegan, or maybe not putting a label on themselves at all and simply just increasing their intake of fruits, vegetables, legumes, and whole grains, peer-reviewed evidence has shown that people who consume more vegetables and less animal products have reduced blood pressure. So let's go into a little bit more detail now about how another category of foods called nitrate-rich vegetables can actually significantly reduce your blood pressure. So before we go there, I'm just going to write one last category here called nitrate-rich vegetables. And this category includes foods like arugula, beets, and spinach. So let's zoom in a little bit on these guys because they're fascinating, and the nitrate metabolism is actually very easy to describe. So nitrate metabolism functions like this. There's 2 compartments of concern. The first one is your mouth, and the second is your stomach. When you consume nitrate-rich vegetables, the nitrate goes directly into your mouth. From your mouth, the nitrates then go directly into your stomach. Now, your stomach is where the nitrate absorption occurs. So 75% of the nitrates that you absorb in your stomach go directly into the toilet. The other 25% of these nitrates get recirculated back into your mouth using a circulatory pathway known as enterosalivary circulation. So 25% go directly back into your mouth, in which the nitrate-reducing bacteria in your mouth reduce nitrates into nitrites. Now these nitrites then serve as the building block for nitric oxide production. So in blood vessels all throughout your body, endothelial cells, when they sense nitrite in your bloodstream, they then convert nitrite into nitric oxide. So this happens within endothelial cells by an enzyme known as endothelial nitric oxide synthase. So when this nitric oxide appears in blood vessels, this nitric oxide has a very specific effect. And this gas diffuses through the endothelial layer and directly interacts with smooth muscle cells in the intima layer. These smooth muscle cells then relax. And as a result of that, the blood vessel increases in diameter. So by increasing in diameter, This is dilation that occurs in response to increased nitric oxide production. This process that we're explaining is flow-mediated dilation. So by increasing nitric oxide delivery to smooth muscle cells, we can increase the cross-sectional diameter. And as a result of that, oxygen that's present inside of red blood cells in your blood can then get delivered to tissues easier. So athletes know this, and in the past 5 to 10 years, some athletes have started to do what's called beat doping. Now, beat doping simply means that within 1 hour of performing some cardiovascular event, whether it's running or cycling or swimming, some athletes will consume a beet smoothie or consume beet juice. And as a result of doing that, what they're doing is they're enhancing their ability to manufacture nitric oxide in endothelial cells, which then leads to more oxygen delivery specifically to muscles. And by doing this, peer-reviewed evidence research has shown that athletes can get between a 3 to 5% increase in cardiovascular endurance, which in the world of sports is a big deal. Now, those living with peripheral arterial disease will also benefit from eating nitrate-rich vegetables. And studies have shown that those with peripheral arterial disease can get up to a 20% improvement in fatigue resistance simply by consuming nitrate-rich vegetables on a frequent basis. So, what are some nitrate-rich vegetables and how much do we need to consume in order to actually get this benefit on a frequent basis? So let's create a list of nitrate-rich vegetables that are going to achieve this effect. So here's a list of nitrate-rich vegetables as well as the amount that delivers a very potent blood pressure reducing effect. So the first is arugula. The second is spinach. The third are things like butter lettuce or oak leaf lettuce. The next are beet greens. Then we have chard, whether this comes from rainbow chard or Swiss chard. Then we have beets themselves, which are a little bit lower on the list, but they're still there. Then we also have rhubarb, as well as radish. Now, for the leaves, like arugula, spinach, lettuce, beet greens, and chard, I recommend eating approximately 1 to 4 cups per day. And for the non-leaves, or the bulbs, I would recommend eating between 1/2 to 2 cups per day. Now you might take a look at this and say, well, that's ridiculous. How is it possible that I'm going to get 1 to 4 cups a day of things like beet greens or arugula into my mouth? Or how am I going to get up to 2 cups a day of beets? Because the flavor on these vegetables can be pretty strong. There's 2 ways that you can accomplish this. Number 1, you can either add these leaves or these bulbs directly to a smoothie, and you can combine it with other fruits that are a little bit sweet, and by doing that, you can kind of mask the flavor. So a large volume can get condensed into a small volume very easily. Another thing you can do is when sauteing vegetables or sauteing beans, you can simply add these nitrate-rich vegetables inside of that as well. And again, the heat from that allows a large volume to condense into a smaller volume very easily. So you can see here that hypertension is directly controlled by your diet. So the top level strategy here is to try and minimize the foods that we know are hypertensive, including salt, alcohol, high-fat foods, oils, and dairy products, and shift towards foods that are more rich in vitamin C, potassium, vinegars, green teas, and plant-based diets. Now, central to the plant-based diets include the nitrate-rich vegetables, which we talked about here, because they have a very specific effect, which is to enhance nitric oxide production, enhance oxygen delivery, and improve flow-mediated dilation. Now, the reason I went into such detail here is because hypertension is actually one of the most easily controllable chronic diseases specifically by utilizing these strategies. unlike other conditions which can take months or sometimes years to impact, eating this way and shifting towards more nitrate-rich vegetables and shifting away from hypertensive foods can be measured in the span of days to weeks. So you as the physician actually have this under your control as you advise your patients to follow this strategy and see changes very quickly.